Florida sits between two totally different ocean floors, a gentle ramp stretching 130 miles into the Gulf and a half-mile cliff on the Atlantic. Now hit both coasts with the same monster hurricane. Hurricane winds grip the top few hundred feet of the sea. On the shallow Gulf side, that's the entire water column. Everything moves. On the deep Atlantic side, it's barely a skin, and the Atlantic has an escape hatch. Water slides back out to sea along the deep bottom. Gulf water has nowhere to go, so the shallow side starts piling up. Same storm, two different weapons. The Gulf stacks water, 8 feet, then 12, a slow-motion flood. The Atlantic pours its energy into huge waves that haven't even felt the bottom yet. Impact. 15 feet of Gulf Ocean pushed into the streets, Atlantic breakers detonating on the dunes. Two coasts, two attacks, and the ocean floor decides which one you get. Helene came up the Gulf on the 26th of September, 2024. A Category 4, 138 miles an hour, and one of the widest storms ever to enter the eastern Gulf. Watch the two arms. On the right side of the track, the wind blows toward the shore. It piles the ocean up against the land, and it does not stop when the storm does. On the left side, the same wind blows the other way. It drags the water out to sea. Same storm, same hour. Opposite oceans. Cedar Key sat on the right. Helene saved her worst for the Carolinas, for the mountains days later, and hundreds of miles inland. But the warning was written on this coast first. Here is the foretelling at Cedar Key. This is a cut straight through Cedar Key, sea to sea, through the town, past the gauge. The highest natural ground anywhere on this line is 10.88 feet. Watch the water. The clock is not running at a constant speed. It races through the quiet hours and slows through the climb so that nothing is skipped. Helene came ashore 72 miles away. Cedar Key was never in the eye. It was on the right-hand side, the side the wind pushes toward. 10.89 feet. Every foot of that line went under, 5/6 of the island with it. Now the same water slowed down, 50 times real time. Every 1 minute reading the gauge took is on the screen. The storm made landfall at 11:10 at night. The eye had already passed. The wind was easing, and the water was still rising. 6 feet an hour at its fastest. It crested at 12:45 in the morning, 95 minutes after landfall, nearly 3 hours after the eye's closest approach. Surge is not a local thing. It is the whole shelf, filling, and it does not care that the storm is gone. "13 days later, the same gauge, the same island. Milton was the stronger storm, 178 miles an hour at its peak, 40 miles an hour more than Helene. and it passed twice as far away on the other side of Cedar Key. Watch the arms reverse. Cedar Key is now on the left. The wind that piled the ocean onto this island under Helene is now blowing straight back out to sea. Minus 4.67 feet. Nearly 5 feet of water pulled out from under the island. 15.5 feet of swing at 1 gauge in 13 days. Strength was never the variable. Which side you are on. The same line across Cedar Key. The same gauge. Everything you just watched fill. Now emptying. The clock runs unevenly again. It hurries through the still hours and slows through the fall, so you see every foot of it go. Watch the ground appear. That gray-green band is seabed. It is underwater every day of the year. Flats, channels, grass beds, the shallow floor of the Big Bend. Milton took the water off it. Minus 4.67 feet, at 26 minutes past midnight on the 10th of October. The water stayed below ordinary low water for 21 hours. Below 3 feet for 6 of them. About 12 square miles of bottom that is never normally exposed stood in the open air. Anything that could not swim out with it was left behind. 13 days earlier, this island was under 11 feet of ocean. Every Floridian knows what a hurricane does to the sea. It sends it ashore. Almost no one is told about the other half. A hurricane is not a wall of wind. It is a wheel, and a wheel turns 2 ways at once. On one flank, it drives the ocean toward the land. On the far flank, the same storm, the same hour, it takes it away. Cedar Key is an old island town on Florida's Big Bend. Fishing boats, clam leases, tin roofs that have seen a century of weather. On the 9th of October, Milton passed 100 miles to the south, and the sea began to leave. It went out past the docks, past the channel markers, past the edge of anything anyone had thought of as the shore. For 21 hours the water stood below its ordinary low, and the floor of the Gulf of Mexico lay in the open air, drying in the wind. We have shown you this storm before. This time watch it as someone would have watched it 7,000 years ago. No forecast, no cone, no warning on a phone. Ian came ashore at Cayo Costa on the 28th of September, 2022, 150 miles an hour, with Fort Myers Beach 20 miles from the eye, on the arm that drives the ocean toward the land. We knew 4 days out. We left. The people who lived on this coast before us had one warning only: the water at their feet. A cut through Estero Island, on ground surveyed before the storm. Bay behind, Gulf in front. The highest natural point on this barrier island is 11.49 feet, 13.23 feet of still water, 15.56 with the waves. The whole island went under. Not the low ground. The highest point on it stood almost 2 feet beneath the sea. Now imagine that without a radio. You do not know it is coming. You do not know how high it will go, or when it will stop, or whether it will stop. You only know that the ground you are standing on is disappearing, and that the water is still rising. There is no rebuilding after that. There is only the decision about where to go. For thousands of years, while the sea was climbing out of the last ice age, Florida's coastal people made that decision again and again. They went inland, and they did not come back. The same afternoon, slowed to 50 times real time. Every 30-second reading the instrument took 2 lines, the sea and the waves riding on top of it. 2 feet and a third of difference at the crest. It peaked at 2:39, 26 minutes before the eye even reached the coast. The water arrived ahead of the storm that made it. That is the detail that would have killed you, not the wind. The wind announces itself. The water does not. Off Manasota Key, 60 miles north of here, there is a pond where people buried their dead 7,200 years ago. They wrapped them in woven fiber and set sharpened stakes around them, standing above the waterline. That pond is now 21 feet under the Gulf of Mexico. They were not careless. They were not unlucky. They simply lost, slowly. An argument with the sea that we are still having. We have 4 days warning now. That is the only thing that has changed.